Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. In this collection, we dive into 4 more gripping true tales rooted in the eerie unknown from the 60s, 70s and 80s. From encounters with spectral gatherings, mysterious beings, apparitions and mythical creatures, these stories serve as a stark reminder of the world beyond our understanding. Night Shift Terror. 34 years ago, in 1989, Chris James was a fresh recruit working as a Border Patrol agent in Webb County, Texas. With the team constantly understaffed, novices like Chris were often paired with similarly inexperienced agents. One midnight shift, Chris and his partner were tasked with monitoring the downriver area. Given the sparse deployment of only 4 agents for that shift, they navigated their responsibilities cautiously and as best they could with the limited experience that they had. They noticed a fire flickering near the river, close to an abandoned, half-constructed house, known amongst the agents as the Party House. The place was notorious as a popular spot for illicit drinking, as well as other potentially more serious activities. In an attempt to catch would-be drug dealers or smugglers unaware, Chris and his partner decided to approach with their car's lights off, veiling their presence in the darkness. As they snuck around the final bend, a disconcerting sight met their eyes. 15 to 20 individuals, all dressed in long dark robes, stood in a circle around a roaring bonfire, arms raised high. Upon the crunch of gravel under the vehicle's tyres reaching the robed figure's ears, a few broke from the circle and started sprinting towards the vehicle. Though they seemed unarmed, their demeanours were far from friendly. Alarmed, Chris hit the brakes, quickly surveyed the scene, and, seeing nothing overtly illegal, despite it resembling a scene ripped straight from a horror film, promptly put the car in reverse and sped off. The frantic shouts of his partner echoed in the car as they retreated into the safety of the main highway. Once they felt somewhat secure on the highway, Chris and his partner took a moment to assess their situation. Their options were limited. They could call for backup, but their team was sparse. The single deputy sheriff was stationed far away, and the highway patrol was unlikely to respond to an incident off the highway. The absurdity of their predicament dawned on them, painting an almost comical picture. 2 novice agents fleeing from a group of cloaked individuals. Throughout the remainder of the night, Chris and his partner wrestled with their predicament, unable to formulate a solid plan of action. As dawn broke, they made the unanimous decision to keep the incident to themselves, afraid of the incredulous reception their story would likely receive from their peers. The following night, curiosity drove Chris back to the scene of the bizarre encounter, where he discovered remnants of the bonfire and footprints. The absence of any corpses provided some relief about their hasty retreat the previous night. Not long after, his partner transferred to a different job, leaving Chris to ponder the puzzling memory of their strange encounter all on his own. The Children and the Reptilians. Doug was plagued by unwelcome guests from the age of 3 until 8, from 1965 to 1970. During the period, his family was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and subsequently at the US Air Force Academy. He was subjected to at least 3 abductions when he was 5 years old. His sister and several neighbourhood children also shared similar experiences. In Ohio, Doug and his sister had encounters with what they identified as reptilian visitors. He was around 4 years old and his sister was roughly 3 at the time. Not knowing what else to call them, they told their parents they saw a snake, having a familiar point of reference in the form of a toy snake made from rounded sheets of coloured plastic named Nikki. In hindsight, Doug now questioned if it was an Anunnaki. These reptilian visitors conducted examinations on the children and would pat their faces. They were described as tall, green and scaly, with yellow slanted eyes, and oddly, they donned hats reminiscent of those worn by 1950s mobsters. One significant abduction incident occurred at the US Air Force Academy when Doug was 5 years old. He vividly recalls seeing a flash of light before finding himself in a sterile, hospital-like environment. He began to scream for his mother. His cries seemed to cause pain to the entity's ears. Alongside the tall and short grey aliens, he also noticed human doctors dressed in white. He was unable to move, paralysed, but remained fully aware of his surroundings. To silence his screams, they sedated him with an unknown object before proceeding with their routine testing. He remembers being led to a waiting room full of terrified humans, and then an attempt being made to make him believe that he was an astronaut. He suspects that this action might have been intended to calm him down before he started experiencing the sensation of falling, which also came with the feeling of wind whooshing by him. Then he remembered landing softly on a bed of feathers, waking up to them fluttering around him. The peculiar position of him lying on his back convinced him that it wasn't a mere dream. The following morning, he confronted his mother, questioning why she hadn't come to his aid, despite his blood-curdling screams the previous night. His parents claimed to have heard nothing, dismissing his experience as a mere nightmare. As he trudged down the hallway towards breakfast, he felt an odd sensation of grogginess, as if he had been drugged. He later sought validation from the neighbourhood kids, asking them about their dreams and nightmares. To his surprise, a girl described an experience strikingly similar to his own. Some nights they would knock on a telephone pole and plead to Nikki to spare them for the night. However, on nights when they taunted him, they would be subjected to another abduction. Scared you, didn't I? Several decades ago, in the early 1970s, a man by the name of Stone Wallace presented a local television program titled Tales of the Supernatural in northern Manitoba, Canada. During one show focused on ghosts and hauntings, a particularly chilling and unusual tale was shared that continues to unnerve Stone to this day. The story was about a young woman named Sheila who had accepted a position teaching elementary classes at a secluded one-room schoolhouse in northern Manitoba. She resided with an elderly woman nearby whose health was declining. The woman was grateful to have Sheila as a tenant, as she also assisted with grocery shopping and various chores around the house. One morning, as Sheila prepared for her day at school, she noticed that the elderly woman was still in bed, complaining of not feeling well. Sheila offered to call the doctor, but the woman declined, requesting only a cup of tea. She assured Sheila that she would feel better as the day progressed. Though apprehensive, Sheila set off on her short walk to the schoolhouse. It was a late autumn day, and the route to the school required Sheila to navigate a brief woodland path that opened onto a clearing where the school stood. As Sheila approached the clearing, she was shocked to witness what appeared to be the elderly woman seemingly hovering about a foot off the ground, gliding across her path, her gaze fixed ahead. Filled with panic, Sheila rushed back to the house. She bolted inside and darted straight to the bedroom where she had left the old woman. The elderly lady was lying in bed, eerily still, exactly where Sheila had last seen her. As Sheila tentatively moved closer to the bedside, the woman's eyes suddenly flew open and she raised her head. With a sinister grin, she uttered, "Scared you, didn't I?" Then her head fell back onto the pillow and she passed away. He thought it had gotten me. In 1989, in the small town of Smithfield, Utah, a boy named Jonathan Marshall, along with the other local kids, used to hear tales told around campfires about a creature known as the hillside growler. The creature was described as a mix between a human and an ape, and was said to inhabit the foothills above their town. Jonathan was just 12 years old during the late spring of that year, when the snow was beginning to melt. Around this time, he and his friend decided to venture to the Smithfield golf course to collect golf balls to sell back to the establishment, which was not yet open for the season. They made their way down a gully by one of the fairways and stumbled upon a freshly dead deer. It bore no bullet wounds, and its neck was twisted into an unnatural position. Curiosity getting the best of him, Jonathan decided to examine the carcass more closely. As he did so, his friend stood some distance away. Jonathan turned around to call his friend over to have a look, when he noticed his friend's face had turned white. The friend abruptly started running in the opposite direction, letting out terrified screams and crying uncontrollably. Jonathan ran after him, catching up at the top of the gully, where he questioned why his friend was behaving so erratically. His friend, still teary-eyed and sobbing, stuttered that he thought the creature had caught Jonathan. Confused, Jonathan asked what he was talking about. His friend explained that as Jonathan had turned to call him over, he had seen a large hairy arm extend from the nearby bushes, seemingly trying to grab Jonathan. At first, Jonathan found it hard to believe and started laughing. But then a deafening roar echoed from the trees within the gully, causing their laughter to fade into silence. Shaken, they could hear heavy footsteps ascending the side of the ravine, and caught sight of a large brown blur sprinting away from them on the opposite side of the ditch. Upon returning to the location of the deer carcass, they discovered that it had disappeared.